When Hiroshima and Nagasaki vanished in two pillars of light and fire, the message was unmistakable. The future of warfare would be nuclear. As protesters begged for sanity, the American military raced headlong into the abyss. They didn't just want bigger bombs, they wanted more bombs. Smaller, faster, hideable, deployable by submarines, backpacks, briefcases, and by men. If they could build a nuke the size of a lunchbox, they would. And they nearly did. In chilling, rarely seen footage, a team of U.S. Special Forces paratroopers free falls from the belly of a transport plane. But one man isn't like the others. Between his legs dangles a metal cylinder the size of a small beer keg. It's not a supply drop. It's a nuclear warhead. Take your nuke everywhere. The Special Atomic Demolition Munition, or SADM, was a man-portable nuclear bomb built by the U.S. in the 1960s and quietly deployed across the world during the Cold War. It was the size of a duffel bag, but it packed the explosive power of up to 1,000 tons of TNT. The concept was simple. If you couldn't stop the enemy at the front, you'd send elite teams deep behind enemy lines to destroy bridges, tunnels, or ports with backpack nukes. These weren't just theoretical missions. U.S. Green Berets and Navy SEALs were trained under an ultra-classified program called Greenlight. They jumped out of planes with the SADM slung beneath them or surfaced from submarines with it strapped between their knees. They rehearsed these missions in the Alps, the Rockies, and even New Hampshire's White Mountains. The idea was simple: destroy the infrastructure the Soviets needed to advance. Blow the world's arteries before the heart can be attacked. But what made this concept even more frightening was the fact that the timers were unreliable. Soldiers were told the detonation time could vary by several minutes, enough to catch them in the blast if they lingered seconds more than absolutely necessary. Major Bill Flavin, the SADM team commander, later joked that whoever designed the mission must have been, quote, on bad hemp. Still, they trained. Still, they were ready. The crazy logic behind the SADM. The SADM was the offspring of a very specific kind of Cold War insanity, the belief that nuclear weapons could be tamed, shrunk, harnessed, and deployed like conventional bombs. It was the atomic age's leap of faith that something once used to erase cities could now fit in a backpack carried by a 25-year-old soldier with a target and a timer. Developed in the early 1960s, the SADM used W-54 warhead, the same compact device that powered the infamous Davy Crockett nuclear bazooka. The entire thing weighed under 150 pounds. The actual warhead was just 16 inches long and 11 inches wide, smaller than some carry-on luggage. And yet, if placed beneath a dam, harbor, or mountain pass, it could obliterate everything within hundreds of meters. The U.S. built over 300 of them. Its purpose was never mass destruction. It was precision devastation, tactical denial. The Army wanted to be able to collapse tunnels and valleys, flood plains, or seal invasion routes with nuclear rubble. Navy SEALs trained to swim into Soviet harbors and plant them underwater. Special Forces planned drops into Central Europe. No target was too remote. The idea was to turn choke points into irradiated traps and to do it silently, covertly, and fast. A regular bomb run or artillery strike required the deployment of dozens of units to generate enough damage to blow a large bridge. Still, any damage could be repaired right after the strike. On the other hand, a single man carrying a SADM could deal even more destruction, and the remaining radiation would make repair efforts extremely hazardous. The only thing more terrifying than the bomb was the psychology of those who carried it. Soldiers knew that once the timer was set, there was no stopping it. They would have mere minutes to escape. And if the terrain was rugged, they were compromised, or the timer glitched. That was it. Some Green Berets told their families goodbye without saying why. Others simply accepted the likelihood they'd never come back. And yet they trained relentlessly. Hours of parachuting with heavy packs, days of cross-country skiing with mock nuclear devices on their backs, weeks of preparing for the all-out nuclear war that would come any day now. The nuclear bazooka. If the Saddam was a surgical blade used by special forces, the Davy Crockett was a chainsaw duct-taped to a bazooka. Officially designated the M28-M29 recoilless rifle, this 1960s U.S. Army weapon was designed to fire a tiny nuclear shell just over a mile. It was, in effect, the world's most dangerous potato launcher. Named after the American folk hero Davy Crockett, it was a product of Cold War panic. What if thousands of Soviet tanks poured through Germany's Fulda Gap? NATO feared it couldn't stop them. So the U.S. built a portable atomic gun, one that infantry could fire from a jeep or a tripod. Its M388 warhead carried a 10 or 20-ton yield, small by nuclear standards, but lethal for anything caught in its path. There was just one problem. It was wildly inaccurate. Crews had to bracket their target using dummy rounds, then hope the real thing landed close enough. The projectile was perched on the barrel, not inside it, attached by a spigot rod. The blast radius was over 500 feet. The lethal radiation zone is nearly a quarter mile, with a firing range of just over a mile. That meant the firing crew was uncomfortably close to their own mini mushroom cloud. Firing it required you to lie down behind a hill, cover your ears, and hope the wind didn't shift the fallout your way. The U.S. Army deployed over 2,000 of these weapons across Europe and South Korea, ready to unleash hell at a moment's notice. Troops knew they might be ordered to fire in defense, but also that pulling the trigger might mean irradiating themselves. In 1962, the U.S. actually fired a live Davy Crockett during a test called Little Feller 1. The mushroom cloud bloomed in the Nevada desert, witnessed by none other than Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. It was the smallest atmospheric nuclear test the U.S. ever conducted, and a bizarre monument to an era when every soldier might become their own nuclear silo. Suitcase bombs. If the idea of American backpack nukes seems surreal, what came next is even more chilling. The Soviets had them too. And unlike the Saddam, many of their details remain hidden, speculative, and potentially still out there. During the Cold War, Soviet engineers reportedly built dozens, maybe hundreds, of so-called suitcase nukes. Known in some circles as the RA-115, these devices were roughly the size of a briefcase, weighed about 50 to 60 pounds, and had yields of up to 1 kiloton. They were designed to be smuggled across borders, hidden near strategic targets, or detonated by deep cover agents behind enemy lines. Defectors like GRU officer Stanislav Luneb claimed he helped scout U.S. locations to stash these devices, remote areas near infrastructure or leadership sites. Others suggested the Soviets buried them as doomsday tools, ready to be activated if war broke out. The KGB's elite Department V reportedly had full control over these operations. Unlike the Saddam, which was wielded by uniformed soldiers, the Soviet suitcase bomb was a weapon of sabotage and panic. The scariest part is that in 1997, Russian General Alexander Lebed publicly claimed that dozens of these devices were missing, gone, perhaps hidden, perhaps stolen. Washington took it seriously. Intelligence agencies scrambled to verify the claims. Experts argued over their credibility. Russia, of course, denied everything. Prime Minister Chernomyrdin called the story absolute stupidity. But the seed was planted. Could a rogue device, a Cold War relic, still lie dormant in some forgotten basement in Europe? It was a nightmare scenario, not a missile from the sky, but a nuclear briefcase left in a subway locker. Portable nuclear weapons were supposed to make war winnable. Instead, they made it scarier, blurrier, and far more personal.